So I called her up and I says, they're gonna give me a job, but I gotta live here for the next year. She says, don't call me no more. But the message was one of stay as long as you have to. And I didn't want to leave there because, see, I was the smartest man in the world. I didn't believe in God because I thought I was God. And one of my sponsors told me early on, he says, you're gonna get better till you give up the job. And what it was is I thought I was better, smarter than everybody else. There was a movie, Rob Lowe, right? Oh. A Beautiful Mind, right? Russell Crowe. Sorry. Wrong movie. Russell Crowe. And he says, when he was playing that math professor who was schizophrenic, and he says, why can't I reason my way out of it? You can't, because it's not a matter of reason. In 1970, they passed the Controlled Substances Act here, and within a few years, substance abuse and alcoholism became mental health disorders within the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual number 3, and has been there ever since. Because it's psychological, it's not a moral dilemma, and it's not an allergy. Drugs don't belong in our body, and I don't care who you are. There are some metabolic systems and ethnic systems that can't manage certain types of substances. Asians and Native Americans don't metabolize drugs well at all. That doesn't stop them from drinking, right? And women, you guys are the higher life form, but you're more susceptible to death and destruction given those circumstances by what everybody else does. And so there needed to be some understanding of what was going on, and I began to learn that for myself, of what I needed to do for me, and what strength I had, and how to manage coping with stress, making a decision-making process. That was 21 years ago for me, right? I've been in relapse prevention since January 21, 1994. I haven't used anything since then, right? Because of what I've learned. I learned how to live differently. Our lives don't have, other than examples, we get green lighted. We don't have a way out. Some of us never get there, but many of us are, what we are and what we know today is all taught, learned, and modeled. Am I wrong? Your cultural values, your family values, your personal values are taught, modeled, and learned. And we make those decisions. You get green lighted along the way, it's okay to do those things. And so I had to unlearn some of those things. Is that my wife? You know, her nickname was Radar a long time ago, because she found me in a bar in Cusco, Peru. Right? The guy from the hotel came running. Is Jimmy Logan here? His wife is on the bar. And my friends that were there, and they said, we ain't hanging around with you no more. Yeah, I'm like 3,500 miles away from LA and 15,000 feet in the Andes, and she found me, and I didn't even have matches from that bar.
She can find you anywhere.
That's right. Anywhere, any time of the day. Nobody would hang around with me. But what happens is we take a look at our circumstances, what our values are, and we're never taught anywhere along the way how to deal with this issue. So we have to learn differently, especially if it becomes a problem. And there's some pamphlets there. The one is AA for you. There's questions there. This is about you asking yourself, if it occurs to you that I may have a problem, you owe yourself the opportunity to address it, right? At least take a look at it. That's what happened when I got placed in treatment. I stood on my butt, I sat on my butt, and I listened to what was going on, and I began to, with a clear mind, determine what was there. There's another one, am I an addict? And there's a series of questions in here. And then within our profession, there's the other bar. And they provide 12-step meetings for judges, lawyers, law clerks, paralegals, so that you're not sitting in the meeting exposed to maybe your clients or whomever, but I mean, who have that sense of sensitivity, but it's there and it's based on what has worked. This one since 1933, international, right? This one, NA since 1953, international. When I first got here, there were 17,000 meetings of NA throughout the world weekly. There are now over 70,000 throughout the world. Right? Something good is happening, people are being helped. Right? And it's a taught situation. It's not something we come to. It's not a decision we can make ourselves without skills in order to do that. And going here and understanding this, or even treatment. A lot of people say, well, we have this magic bullet mentality, right? And if one is good, is two better? Of course. On the other hand, well, you don't have to do all of that. Just take this pill and you'll never want to use it again. You never want to do it. Excuse me, the behaviors don't change. You may manage that chemical balance in your body, but not the behaviors that take you back to that sort of situation. So they become a convenience item. And it's not leaving that stuff behind by convenience, because when it's inconvenient, we won't do it. I'm waiting to see what the science is going to be on that laser thing. They're hitting the pleasure reward system. It doesn't just dull the system with regard to the pleasure that alcohol brings you. A lot of other things. Nothing's going to be pleasurable after a while. You know, we tried lobotomies in the 50s, right, to change people's behavior. We're going back to it, by the way. I mean, that's not going to help. Our brain will wrap around it. But the things that we have now, alcohol, been around. The Egyptians invented distillation. They wanted to take out the impurities and make it better. Beer has been around since the BCs, right? All it was water and grain that fermented, and people drank and said, ooh, this is good. And when it came to other alcohols, fermented fruit develops alcohol once the sugar starts to break down. I don't know if Disney or National Geographic has a movie on drunk monkeys falling out of trees. But around the Potomac and in Washington, when the cherry blossoms around, the cherries come out and then they start to ferment. And then the birds are getting drunk and running into windows and attacking people. In November, in India, harvest time, the people over there in their villages will make these big vats of beer. The elephants are out there going, party time. And like Hell's Angels, they raid those villages, they stomp on people and get drunk. So it's not about us, it's not a matter of thought, it's what it does to them, and they get the same types of cravings and things for that relief or that sense that they get, and they'll get drunk in a hot minute. I was talking about rock and roll. They had a chimpanzee, a female, who lost a couple husbands, I think in San Diego, and she started smoking cigarettes. She'd pick them up, you know, in the cars that come by, she smoked like crazy. They used to have to buy her cigarettes or she'd get out of control, right? And they had to get her to stop smoking. So they did it by firing up another part of her pleasure reward system and her neurotransmitters by playing rock and roll, which she really liked. So she'd like be dancing, and then she smoked less. She finally quit that because she got fired up behind that. But it's not about reason. It's not about reason. We can't reason our way out of it. There are those of us that have that capacity early on. Not everybody has the problem and is able to regulate their behavior. But for those that don't, you owe it to yourself to find something different in order to address that issue, right? And has my life changed? Significantly. And do I need to be in places? No, I don't set myself up for anything. I don't make excuses to myself about what my needs are and what I need to do about them. I take care of business as it comes up and deal with it, you know? See, you have to do that with two wives. Anyway, and my children, taught, modeled, and learned. My daughter graduated from UC Irvine. She's on administrative staff at a tech company in San Francisco. We were talking about, you need to be careful when you become 21. She didn't drink till she was 21. We had an agreement, and it was not appropriate. And the question wasn't, well, you did it because it was bad for me then and it's bad for you now, forget about it. But she, on her own, she says, you know what that stuff does to your brain? And she's like, all cerebral, right? So my son, he told me one day, he says, I don't want to be a fool like you. He was 11 years old driving me home from bars in my nice New Yorker, right? How good is that? I was 46 years old sneaking out of the house and pushing 72 O's into the street so I could go get more, and then pushing it back in the driveway. I mean, the insanity of that. But my son, neither one of them has ever worn those special bracelets and gotten a chauffeured ride anywhere. They've been on ride-alongs as invited guests. And I've seen my son, who's like 5'10", with my nephew, who's 6 feet tall. Between the two of them, they will split one 12-ouncer. How do they do that? I watched them do that. They'll share a beer. And that's it, just one. Because it's not important in their life. They made decisions for themselves. Well, you know, I know that I've made progress in terms of what I've learned. There's a way out of what happens with us. We do have to be concerned about what happens to us and how we manage things, how we cope with stress, how we cope with our caseloads, how we cope with those circumstances, and becoming part of the process of, well, and doing harm to ourselves. And saying, I'm doing the right thing, I'm helping people, I'm doing the right thing, I'm helping people. We need to take care of ourselves. My family didn't know how to help me, but I found people that did. And what I know is that that stuff is really harmful, right? What's the one that's out on the streets right now? Flaca, means skinny in Spanish. It's something like along the lines of ecstasy that hit the streets, and people are, one guy got impaled on the police station fence because he thought people were chasing him. And he was stuck up there hanging, and they took him down. Another guy broke the window down, instead of using the door, at the police station in order to get in because people were chasing him on this flaca. We got ecstasy, we got Molly, we got pharmaceuticals. We took opium, which worked really well, okay? And those were the things that helped us medically, the things that were grew in nature that brought us relief. And then somebody says, well, why don't we synthesize that, put it together like the Egyptians did, and let's see if we can take out the bad stuff and make it good. So we took opium and created morphine. Heard of that stuff? Mm-hmm. And it was good, but people became addicted, right? And then we thought, well, the Germans said, we're going to create the greatest aspirin in the world, and we're going to call it heroin for our heroic efforts. Well, the morphine was like 5 to 10 times more powerful than the opium, and the heroin was 10 times more powerful than the morphine. And they said, no, here in the United States, there's no medical value with regard to something that's strong, so it's outlawed here. But morphine is still used, am I wrong? And so we keep making things better. What do we got now? Well, let's take out the bad stuff and make something good. And we'll call it Vicodin. Oh yeah? It's much more stronger than the heroin. $85 for a pill on the street. But you can get one, it'll last 12 hours. You can get a prescription. Ask Rush Limbaugh, right? You can get a prescription for that stuff. The doctor gave it to me, it's legit. Yeah, but the way we use it isn't. And we can abuse things regardless of what the nature or their source is. And then they said, well, let's try OxyContin. Big problem. Hillbilly heroin, they called it, right? And then now, I just heard they got another one that lasts 24 hours. And if one is good, it's two better. You got ATM cards? You have microwaves? You want it now, right? You don't want to wait. Do you take 2 aspirin because one isn't fast enough? We have that capacity to do that because we're looking for relief. It's not pathological for us to do that, but we have to be careful of what we put in our bodies. You know which age group has the biggest drug problem in the United States right now?
Boomers.
The boomers. We're the most over-medicated people on the planet. Here, take this, here, take this, here, take this. And then they have this thing called synergistic effect, where you take multiple things, and God forbid you have a beer with that, or a glass of wine, or a martini, because that exacerbates the effect of those things on your body. Sometimes even foods you eat can have an effect on the medications you're taking. And you always need to tell your doctor what you take. Do people intend to become addicted? Many have become addicted, not. The older population than mine that's in convalescent hospitals, many of them are addicted. About 20, what's it? About 15, when I was at Socorro, we started seeing an influx of 65-year-old men, men in their 60s, living over on the nickel. They were being brought in that had crack problems, crack addictions. And what's that? They were vulnerable, they were alone, they were on the streets. Walk into a bar, hey daddy, will you buy me a beer? You know, many faldas would come up and like, hey daddy, you want to go outside and hit this with me? And then all of a sudden they were hitting, they were vulnerable, didn't have family, didn't have a place to be, and they wound up addicted. That can happen. If you don't have resources, people, period. The big thing right now is heroin. Since some things happen. The heroin production is 200%. It's purer than it was before. They don't put a lot of bunk in it, and it's hitting the streets. They're giving it to people free. They're giving it to teenagers free. Because after 2 weeks, 3 weeks of using, do you have any more of that stuff? Because the withdrawal sets in, and all of a sudden they got them, and they're having to work for that hit. People who need pain relievers, it's easier for them to go hit the connect for a little bit of heroin and put it in your nose, put it in a drink. You don't have to necessarily slam it, but you get it in your body, and it is a pain reliever. And it's pure. It's not like the stuff that was sold like 20 years ago. This stuff is hot and hitting the market. There's competition. Meth labs, all the way down there. And medical marijuana. Please. Do you even know where they grew it and whether or not they dipped it? You tried, well, I'll try the spice and the K2, they're synthetic. Yeah. Synthetic what? But you want a medical marijuana prescription? Go to the Venice Boardwalk, close your eyes and go like this. And then when you get that one full, go like this, and you'll have a bag. Does it affect you? Yeah. And the younger you use it does. People who use substances at an early age up until age 25, your brain is growing. Anything you do in between affects that growth, especially if you do it to excess, right? And so weed used by the kids, alcohol used by the kids. The largest drinking population in the United States is 18 to 25. They drink more than everybody else, right? And what we take a look at is those populations, the influences and things like that. Have you seen that commercial? Oh, this is the one. Forgive me, cigarette smokers, but nicotine was discovered by Jean-Claude Nicot, a Frenchman, in the 1600s. And it was an insecticide. All you little bugs are going to die. No. And that's what it was. But what does it do? It deals with the neurotransmitters. We have a variety of neurotransmitters. The dopamine, pleasure, movement, thoughts, that's what goes on. That's the big one. That's the bell ringer for us. Serotonin, mood, hunger, sleep, relaxation, right? Acetylcholine, movement and memory. And then you have norepinephrine, epinephrine. Those are energy things within your body. You have endorphins. We have our own bodies will make pain relieving situations. You know when your body goes into shock after a major injury, your body is pumped full of endorphins to reduce the pain so you won't die of shock. Right? It reduces the pain with regard to that. The two that tobacco runs, GABA and glutamate, they run the uppers and the downers, and cigarettes are very efficient in that they will raise those levels as needed. If you have anxiety, that cigarette will help you calm down. If you are feeling down and need to elevate your mood, that same cigarette will elevate your mood, right? And it's the most addictive drug on the planet, second only to alcohol, right? I'm not saying don't use. That decision's yours. But I think you have to come to terms with what the effect is on you. You know how many friends I've had that died from smoking? You know how many friends I have that have died from cirrhosis of the liver? Do you know how many friends I have that have died from hepatitis C? Indiana is facing a crisis right now because they got all their youth out there slamming like crazy, and they all got HIV, AIDS, and Hep C from slamming with dirty needles. Nobody's immune. If it's there and you're trying, when you've been drinking, many of you may relate to this, when you've been drinking for a while, and somebody says, try this. Does that sound like a good idea? This will make you feel better. Yeah, a Red Bull and a bunch of alcoholic drinks is going to make you feel better? No, all you are is a wide awake drunk. That's it. It's not going to get there. And with regard to smoking weed, right? Rolling it up, firing it up, and smoking it. The people that I know people who have obstructive pulmonary disorders based on smoking just weed over the years. Because it does the same thing a cigarette does. That's carbon monoxide. Go suck on a tailpipe. Same thing. So you get a little light, but your lungs get a little infected, gone. And that's what happens. We have obstructive pulmonary disorders. We have on the radio, I don't know, people who are taking those opioids, medications, and are experiencing gastrointestinal difficulties, guess what? You're getting that shortcut